For the newcomers, could you explain what the servers do,
Yeah.
what the renderers do?
Yeah, so basically the server is the workhorse. Most of the processing is going on in the server. What we just talked about is that the processing is generating noise. So that's what you separate from the actual component that is driving the DAC. And basically the first unit, which is connected to the network, acts like a filter.
So what does a renderer do?
The render is actually the component between the player and the DAC.
What kind of function does it have then?
So when the data is converted into digital music stream, the renderer is serving it into the DAC.
You talked about 6 different ways of power separation with having 2 chassis. Can you explain about that more?
Yeah, so when having a dual system, you of course also have dual power supply,
Right.
which is just separated. So for example, the load on the server, the first unit, is much higher, and that's why we want a dedicated power supply also for renderer, because you don't want to have the noise from the first unit compromising the renderer module. So that's why there is basically a double power supply.
What is one design decision that gave the biggest sonic win but caused the biggest headache?
The biggest headache is software. Of course, there is a lot of to design, but in general, you can design something that sounds great or make the best music, but if it's not reliable or it doesn't work 9 out of 10, then you cannot sell it. Right. So on one side, you want the best performance. On the other hand, it has to be rock solid.
Right.
To bring those two together is a very big challenge, and I would say in the software part, that's the biggest challenge.
What about the user interface?
Yeah, the user interface for playing music in our products is Roon, and in Psion we added Cubus Connect, so we don't have to worry about that interface. Of course, there is also the dashboard in the Pinkfon OS, and in the dashboard there is the option to update your Pinkfon. There is also the option for remote control. That is a service that we offer. And of course, the standard information like IP address, etc., and how many times your stream is up. But Pinkfon dashboard is also designed by a graphical designer. It's a very clean interface, good looking in my opinion, and very easy to operate. Yeah. So we made sure that with 2 clicks, you can get everywhere.
How do you define musicality?
That is the emotional impact a system make. Yeah, that's the number 1 priority. Of course, it's different for everyone, but we listen with a few people to new products, new development. And of course, once we are in beta stage, then we have a group of people around us that also listen to new products and new developments. But emotional impact, that's for me the musicality.
How would you define the emotional impact?
Yeah. This is a bit personal. I connect moments in my life or experience to music. Music is being played at that moment, or I connect it because of the lyrics of the song to a specific moment in my life. So for me, I have a few of these songs, and I can listen to these songs on systems and it's absolutely doing nothing with me. It's just there.
Yeah.
And then I'm listening on another system I'm totally unfamiliar with, but immediately it hits me. And that is something, I don't know, it's, I don't think it's really something I can describe.
Well, this sounds more like people say about analog than digital.
I can listen to analog, I can listen to digital. For me, there is not really, of course, we make a digital product. So I could say, yeah, for me, digital is the best, but that's not the case. No. There is, analog and digital both have their place in high-end audio. And it also really depends on what is the source of your recording that you're listening to. Is it recorded analog? Is it recorded digital? What is the master? And what is the dynamic range of the recording. So there are just albums that sound phenomenal in digital and not on analog, and also the other way around. So for me, it's just, yeah.
For example,
Dynamic range is one thing. I think the dynamic range on digital is much wider than, yeah. And music has been recorded, I think, in the last 30 years, almost always in digital. Before that, or maybe it's longer, there is, of course, a lot of analog recordings, recorded analog, pressed on vinyl or tape, or yeah, that's almost impossible to create those recordings to convert them to digital. Yeah. So for me, it just lives side by side.
what digital audio format do you prefer?
PCM,
PCM.
just 16-bit 44.1, Redbook.
Or why not DSD?
It depends on the listener, of course, and I also here I think it's the DAC. Yeah. So DSD or PCM both are very different. So a DAC manufacturer designing their DAC completely around DSD playback will probably sound better on DSD. But my preference is just PCM.
A 16-bit has limited dynamic range than 24-bit.
Yeah. It also depends on a Redbook. Has a very neutral mastering.